Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Into the 99 podcast, where we've got 99 cards because Commander is number one. I am your Necromancer with all the answers, Necrozak, and today I am joined by no one. Dan and Lotus are feeling under the weather, so I'm here to bring you guys some Commander goodness on my own. Um, so today we're going to be talking about another deck that's near and dear to my heart. If you were around for the Karador Yomori deck I did, you guys should know that is my absolute favorite personal deck. But the deck I'm going to talk about today is another one out of my personal collection that is very, very close. It's probably my second favorite deck I own. And it's one of the ones I've had about as long as Karador. So today we're going to be talking about the Mimeoplasm. You guys probably know about this guy. It's been around for a very long time. But if you don't, the Mimeoplasm is 2 black, green, blue, so we're in Sultai, for a 0/0 legendary creature ooze. As the Mimeoplasm enters the battlefield, you may exile 2 creature cards from graveyards. If you do, it enters the battlefield as a copy of one of those creatures with a number of additional +1/+1 counters on it equal to the power of the other card. So basically, what you're doing is when the Mimeoplasm ETBs, you can choose one creature from any graveyard to be the power and toughness of the Mimeoplasm, and another creature to have basically all the abilities of that creature. So there are a ton of different ways you can build the Mimeoplasm. How I built the Mimeoplasm is to be a very weird blob. Like I'm doing what I refer to as splicing. So this is a mutate deck as well as a copy deck. We'll get into it. So starting off, the first thing I want to talk about is ramp. Ramp in this deck is fairly straightforward. We have Arcane Signet, so artifact 2, tap it, add 1 mana of any color of your commander's color identity. We have Cultivate, 2 and a green for sorcery. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, and put one on the battlefield, tap the other into your hand. Kodama's Reach, 2 and a green. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, put one on the battlefield, tap the other into your hand, then shuffle. Nature's Lore lets us, for 1 and a green, search for a forest card, put that card on the battlefield, then shuffle. Rampant Growth, 1 and a green for sorcery, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Sky Shroud Claim, 3 and a green sorcery, search your library for up to 2 forest cards, put them on the battlefield, then shuffle. And Soul Ring, 1 for an artifact that add 2 generic. The 2 cards in my ramp section that I'm really excited to talk about, one of the first is a creature. It's Migratory Greathorn, 3 and a green for a beast, 3/4 with mutate for 2 and a green. Whenever this creature mutates, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, tap, and shuffle your library. So what's really cool about this guy is if we have a creature that's smaller, we're able to put this over top with mutating and also ramp for 3. So it's basically a rampant growth or a cultivate with a body. And the other card in the ramp section that is could be considered utility is a planeswalker. It's Nissa of the Shadowed Bogs. It's 2 black and a green for a 4 loyalty Nissa. She inherently has landfall, so whenever a land ETBs under your control, you put a loyalty counter on Nissa. So right off the bat, if we're ramping fairly hard, which this deck can allow us to do, Nissa can come out. Nissa can just accumulate so many +1, or not +1 counters, sorry, loyalty counters. You can then tick Nissa up for 1, and you untap target land you control. You may have that land become a 3/3 elemental creature with haste and menace until the end of turn. It's still a land. So there are a lot of really weird things you can do, which is kind of why I like this Nissa in this deck. Being able to animate a land, we can just basically take Nissa up to retap a land that we have if we need, one of our utility lands, or if we just need the extra mana that the land could produce. Also, it does become a creature, so you can mutate onto it. And it gets really weird and very convoluted, but it's something that kind of really drew me to this, Nissa as part of Ramp. And her final ability is Neg 5. You may put a creature card with CMC less than or equal to the number of lands you control onto the battlefield from your hand or graveyard with 2+1/+1 counters on it. So with the Mimeoplasm's typical builds, you're going to want to kind of be throwing creatures away fairly often or making people mill. In this deck, we're throwing away creatures pretty often. So sometimes, maybe you toss a couple creatures you don't necessarily need for the Mimeoplasm. So you're able to potentially reanimate them at the cost of 5 loyalty counters from Nissa. And with as many ways as we have to ramp in this deck, those 5 loyalty counters might really not be that big of a deal. So that's why she's in here. I think she sets up a lot of really unique and interesting lines of play. Um, Moving on, we are going to go to our draw section. Now, I think for draw, this is a pretty spicy draw section. It's not so straightforward as a lot of my other decks. So the first card in our draw section is Ancient Excavation. God, I couldn't pronounce that. It's 2, a blue and a green for an instant. Draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand. Then discard a card for each card you draw in this way, and then you can basically end cycle for 2. So this is kind of nice. With the Mimeoplasm, we're wanting to set up a lot of like big plays by being able to cast the Mimeoplasm and remove 2 creatures from our graveyard because we're not so concerned about other people's graveyard. Yes, if we can get there, and pull someone's like big stuff out of the graveyard, awesome. But we want to be self-reliant. So excavation is a good way to set that up. Uh, Next, we have Cold-Eyed Selkie. It's 1 hybrid blue-green for a 1/1 Merfolk Rogue. It has Island Walk, so if an opponent controls an island, which in our format, it's probably going to happen, um, Cold-Eyed Selkie can attack without being blocked. And whenever Cold-Eyed Selkie deals combat damage to a player, you may draw that many cards. So this is a situation where if we mutate bigger stuff onto Cold-Eyed Selkie, we're getting to draw a ton of cards. Or if we want to try to kill someone with commander damage, we can exile a card from our graveyard that's pretty beefy and then have exile Cold-Eyed Selkie to have the Mimeoplasm become a a copy of Cold-Eyed Selkie essentially, but bigger. Um, it's actually really fun. I've done it a couple times and it becomes very problematic very quickly. Next, we have Dreamtail Heron. It's 4 and a blue for a 3/4 elemental bird with mutate, 3 and a blue. It has flying, and whenever this creature mutates, you draw a card. Same thing. If we want to put this on or under a bigger creature, suddenly that creature has flying, and evasion is something we always look for in a creature that allows us to draw. But also, if we want to go the commander damage route, having evasion on our blob is fairly good. And just mutating onto it to make it bigger and give it more things is always fun. Next, we have Frantic Search. It's 2 and a blue for an instant. You draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards, untap up to 3 lands. This is always such a fun card because it allows us to set up our graveyard a little bit better, draw more, and then if we have utility lands, we can untap those lands. You don't necessarily have to untap the lands you use to tap Frantic Search. Or if you really just need to extend your plays, Frantic Search can help you get there too. Next on the draw list is Baby Godzilla Ruin Reborn, or Polywog Symbiote. It's 1 and a blue for a 1/3 frog. Each creature spell you cast costs 1 less to catch if it has mutate, so it's automatically lowering the cost of all of our creatures with mutate, which is nice because some of them are a little bit more expensive than I would like to pay for. And then whenever you cast a creature spell, if it has mutate, you draw a card and discard a card. This is doing the same thing we want to do for the Mimeoplasm. Maybe we have something in our hand and we can't get into the graveyard, and that's where we really want it. You're able to use Polywog Symbiote here to basically loot, which is super awesome. I've ran into a couple of situations where needing to be able to throw stuff into our graveyard from our hand has been a way for me to win, and I haven't had the outs to it. So Baby Godzilla really helps that. Um, Next on the list is Return of the Wild Speaker. It's 4 and a green for an instant. You can choose one. You draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control, or non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 till end of turn. Typically in this deck, I'm using that first ability because we don't have very many human creatures, and typically the Mimeoplasm is massive, so being able to draw into more answers or more responses is pretty important. So, Return the Wild Speaker, good card. Um, Next is Sea Dasher Octopus. It's 1 double blue for a 2/2 octopus. It has Mutate for 1 and a blue. It has Flash, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. This is another just fun card. It can go under something. So, like if you have another creature that just has better abilities or is bigger, I'm sorry, suddenly you're just being able to draw a card at flash speed, or you can put it on top of something and you just have an octopus. And the final card in this section is Thirst for Discovery. It's 2 and a blue, it's an instant, and you draw 3 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard a basic land card. Um, I basically look at this as just drawing 3 cards, discarding 2. Once again, I'm putting it in here because I want to have as many outs as possible in my hand to be able to set up my graveyard. I can't stress how many times I've had cards in my hand I wanted in my graveyard and no way to do that. So as this deck has evolved throughout the years, I've looked for cards like Thirst for Discovery to be able to help set that up. Next, we're going to move into the removal section. Starting off the list is Acidic Slime. It's 3 double green for a 2/2 ooze with Death Touch. When Acidic Slime ETBs, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. This is just a good card in general. The Death Touch is nice because you could essentially mutate a creature onto this or under this and have a creature with Death Touch. So maybe you have your Dreamtail Heron or something like that where people don't want to sacrifice a creature for blockers and be able to just draw a card. Otherwise, it's just good removal. This is a creature heavy deck, so having the ability to recur creatures is in this deck, and being able to get ETBs off of Acidic Slime is nice. Next on the list is Dirge Bat. It's 2 double black for a 3/3 bat. It has Mutate for 4 double black, Flash Flying. Whenever this creature mutates, destroy a target, a creature, or planeswalker an opponent controls. Once again, Mutate is big in this deck. I really, really like being able to make my Mimeoplasm, I don't know, an 11/11 with Island Walk, then suddenly I can throw a Dirgebat on it, and now he has flying. Being able to just Voltron out my Mimeoplasm with a bunch of these weird mutate creatures is why I really like this deck. It's a lot of fun. Next on the list is Nature's Claim. It's 1 green for an instant. Destroy target artifact or enchantment its controller gains 4 life. In our format, I really don't mind to pay 1 green to get rid of something that's oppressive for me or problematic for me and give that person 4 life. Chances are, if I'm giving them 4 life, they're not going to have it for very long. Also, you can kind of use this as a political tool. I have saved someone's life with this card before, and it's helped me. Think of it as you will. Moving on, we have Sawtusk Demolisher. It's 4 double green for a 6/6 beast with Mutate for 3 and a green. It has Trample, and whenever this creature mutates, destroy a target non-creature permanent. Its controller gets a 3/3 beast creature token. This is awesome because it helps to get rid of pesky lands. Acidic Slime does the same thing as far as getting rid of pesky lands, and that's something we really need to be mindful of because now that some of these lands have gotten cheaper, these utility lands just kind of need to be dealt with. Typically, if someone has an Urborg on their side of the field, it's probably not good for you. So being able to get rid of it and give them a 3/3 beast is fine. Also, it being a 6/6 trampler is very relevant because it can go under or over a creature, and suddenly that creature has more evasion and maybe a bigger body. Scavenging Ooze is the next card. It's 1 and a green for a 2/2 ooze. You can pay 1 green and you exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a creature card, put a +1/+1 counter on Scavenging Ooze and you gain 1 life. This is just graveyard hate. As much as I hate graveyard hate, it is a necessary evil. Sometimes, you're going to be sitting at the table and maybe you're playing against another Mimeoplasm deck or you're playing against another graveyard-centric deck. Being able to see their plays and get rid of them is going to be important. It also is very nice for those decks that have flashback cards in their graveyard. Anything that you're going to be expecting to see multiple times a game, Scavenging Ooze being on the battlefield can really stop someone's game plan. It also can help be a political card where it's like someone sees it and they know you have it, and they're like, "Hey, can I flashback this card and I'll do something for you?" It's a nice bargaining tool. Um, so this card I just put in the deck, and I'm super excited about it because it's a very mean card, but it's so cool. It's Toxrill the Corrosive. It's 5 double black for a legendary creature slug horror 7/7. At the beginning of each end step, put a slime counter on each creature you don't control. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1 for each slime counter on them. Whenever a creature you don't control with a slime counter on it dies, create a 1/1 black slug creature token. Then you can play blue and a black. You sacrifice a slug and draw a card. This card is just insane. It's very, very good. If I reanimate it in this deck, it's fine. If I exile it to have Mimeoplasm become a copy of it, it's still fine. There's really not a bad situation to play this card. And because we're in green, getting to 5 double black isn't that unreasonable, and playing it maybe a couple turns early. All right. The last card on our removal suite is Void Slime. It's green, double blue for an instant. Counter target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. This is just a great removal. It is a little tricky to cast because you have to have the double blue and a green, but being able to stop an activated ability or counter spell or even triggered ability is just, it's great. There are so many problematic cards out in our format. Being able to just have a answer for any of it is awesome. Next on our list of cards, we're going to get into the utilities section. Some of these cards could be placed in other sections, but because they don't specifically say draw or have removal stapled on them, I felt like this was a better place for them. So at the top of the list, we have Grizzly Salvage. It's a green and a black for an instant. You reveal the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a creature or land card from among them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. This could almost be considered card draw in this deck because being able to set up your graveyard is super important. So you could, Grizzly Salvage, see that you have a creature you want Mimeoplasm to become, and then like a smaller creature or something like that, or that one land you're missing to be able to play your Void Slime or have access to your Void Slime. This basically lets us get there, so we know what's coming up. So Muldrotha the Gravetide is a super powerful card, and for a long time I didn't want to put it in this deck because I was worried it was going to become the commander. But since I've had like more access to playing this deck, I have found that Muldrotha is super, super good in this deck. Muldrotha the Greatide is 3 black, blue, green for a legendary creature elemental avatar. It's a 6/6. During each of your turns, you may play a land and cast a permanent spell from your of each permanent type from your graveyard. It's just insane. What's cool is Mutate is like it's a basically a different way to cast a creature, right? So being able to mutate from your graveyard is awesome. I've had many situations where I've been able to go like Muldrotha, mutate onto something, and now my Mimeoplasm has flying, and it didn't currently have flying, and it was now unblockable essentially, and been able to do a lot of damage or get that card draw that I needed. And not to mention, like, you can recast Soul Ring, or you can recast like, or play a land. There are plenty of different reasons why Muldrotha is awesome. I've very much enjoyed it being added into this deck. Next is Murkfield Liege. It's 2 hybrid blue green blue green blue green for a 4/4 horror. Other green creatures you control get +1/+1. Other blue creatures you control get +1/+1. Untap all green and or blue creatures you control during each other player's untap step. This could be Seedborn Muse, but I feel like Seedborn Muse gets targeted very quickly, whereas Murkfield Liege, because it doesn't untap your lands, people tend to leave it alone. But what's nice is the Mimeoplasm is both a blue and a green creature, so it's innately getting a +2/+2 to its stats, which once again, you can very easily swing this as a Voltron style deck So being able to get those extra 2 points of commander damage on someone does stack up. We have some very big creatures that Mimeoplasm can become in this deck, so having a +2/+2 to its stat line is very scary. If you know me, you know I put this card in every single deck that I can. It's Phyrexian Reclamation, 1 black enchantment. You can pay 1 in a black, pay 2 life, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Sometimes you bend something you don't need to, or something that you need in that moment. Phyrexian Reclamation lets us be a little bit more reckless with what we're doing. We don't get as punished on our plays. Sultai Ascendancy is the next card. It's a black, green, blue for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you look at the top 2 cards of your library. Excuse me. You put any number of them on into your graveyard and put the rest on top of your library in any order. So same thing. We're wanting to set up our graveyard every single turn. We want to know what's on the pipeline. We want to know like what to expect, because we can, we're wanting to make big creatures. We want to make big plays. This lets us throw stuff into the graveyard so that we can make the Mimeoplasm become something a little bit more scary. Or you could go the route of like seeing that you have a land, but you have so many lands on the battlefield. Maybe you can just pitch your lands to clean off the top of your library. It basically helps us to get to our gas much quicker. The next card on the list is another Planeswalker. I'm not as sold on this card yet. When I've played it, it's been all right, but I'm not entirely sure if it's exactly what I need. This could potentially become another mutate creature, in my opinion, or maybe another card draw, instance of card draw. But it's Tameo, Collector of Tales. It's 2 of green blue for a 5 loyalty Tameo. She has an innate ability that says spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause you to discard cards or sacrifice permanents. That's mainly why she's in this deck. If all I have is Mimeoplasm as an attacker or blocker, and it's beefed up the way I want it to be, getting hit with like a guess verdict or something that makes us sacrifice it is a really, really bad feeling. A Fleshbag Marauder coming down, and this is my only creatures. It's awful. So that's why she's in here. Her other abilities are also fine. They're not bad by any means. I've just been I felt like it's kind of been not as impactful as I was hoping. Her +1 says you choose a non-land card name, and you reveal the top 4 cards of your library. Put all cards with a chosen name from among them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. Once again, like you can name something that you're actually looking for, potentially hit it, or as I use her, I just name like Borborygmos and just mill the top 4 cards. It's not bad. Neg 3, you return target card from your graveyard to your hand. Once, like an Eternal Witness, pretty good, whatever. Tortured Existence is the next card in this section. It's 1 black for an enchantment. You pay 1 black. You choose and discard a creature card. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Kind of the same thing that I've talked about with a few other cards in this list already, is that being able to set up your graveyard is the most important thing you could be doing. So just being able to say, oh, I have this card in hand and I need it engraved, so Mimeoplasm can become this, is so important. So being able to switch them is nice. Or if someone's going to play Graveyard Hate and you're about to lose like one of your big creatures or one of the things you don't want to lose, you could take something from your hand. Sorry, take a creature card from your hand that's less impactful at that point in time and swap them out so that you don't end up losing that card. I've had that happen before, and it's nice. If someone's specifically trying to, Bojuka Bog you and you have a big creature that you want Mimeoplasm to become, being able to Tortured Existence out something like a Dreamtail Heron or whatever is fine. Last card I would put in the utility section, and did put in the utility section, is Vivian, Champion of the Wild. It's 2 to green. She's a 4 loyalty Vivian that has an innate ability as well. You may cast creature spells as though they had flash. That already was enough for me. I love it. I've been able to mutate out at flash speed, play creatures at flash speed. It allows me to get ahead of my opponents much quicker because I don't have anything that gives my creatures haste innately. So being able to play them on my opponent's end step before my turn has been very, very helpful. And because I'm a blue deck, if I wanted to play more counterspell magic, this allows me to really kind of outpace the table. Like if I want to hold up double blue or a double blue and a green for a void slime and nothing has been cast, that's problematic. When I get to my turn, when I get to my opponent's end step before my turn, I can just use all my mana more efficiently. But she does come with some other really good abilities. Her +1 until your next turn, up to one target creature gains vigilance and reach, which I have used. Once again, this is a Voltron style deck. Having the Mimeoplasm with vigilance is pretty good. And then her -2, you look at the top 3 cards of your library, exile one of them face down, and you may put the rest. I'm sorry, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. For as long as they remain for as long as they remain exiled, you may look at that card and cast it if it's a creature card. So you got to be kind of careful. You could potentially lose something good or slow yourself down, but being able to play creatures kind of whenever and know what you have is nice. And because it's an exile, it's less likely to get messed with, which is important. All right, moving on. We have a tutor section. I typically don't go this deep into tutors, but I was kind of not liking how this deck was running before adding the tutors. Now I think I kind of went a little overboard, so I might make a few cuts in this section. But currently, we have 8 tutors, the first of which is Buried Alive. It's 2 and a black for a sorcery. You search your library for up to 3 creature cards, put them into your graveyard, and then shuffle your library. This is just awesome. Most of the time, I'm searching for 2 creature cards and then a card that I know I can pull out of the graveyard, which we'll talk about after this section. So I'm not really losing anything. It goes in any deck that cares about graveyard stuff. Next is Burning Rune Demon. It's 4 double black for a 6/6 Demon Berserker with flying. When Burning Rune Demon ETBs, you may search your library for exactly 2 cards and not named Burning Rune Demon that have different names. If you do, reveal the cards. An opponent chooses one of them. You put the chosen card into your hand and the other into your graveyard. Then you shuffle your library. For this deck, this is essentially just another Buried Alive, but on a creature. This is kind of what we're wanting to be doing. I'm typically going to go find 2 creature cards that you don't want me to have access to. Either way, I'm going to have access to them, whether it's in the graveyard or in my hand. The Burning Rune Demon is, like I said, just kind of like a Buried Alive or an Entomb, but on a creature. Corpse Connoisseur is 4 and a black for a zombie wizard with 3. That's a 3/3. When it ETBs, you search your library for 1 creature card, put it into your graveyard, and then shuffle your library. Then it has Unearth for 3 and a black. Same thing. We're just entombing a creature, but with a creature. We have Demonic Tutor as the next card. It's 1 and a black. Search your library for a card, put it in your hand, and shuffle your library. I have one. It's good. Then we have Entomb, 1 black for an instant. You search your library for a card, that card into your graveyard and shuffle your library. This is nice because if you wanted to go like a flashback route or, putting a land into the graveyard because you're playing like a Gitrog or something, Entomb can do that. People typically think it only is creatures, but it's any card. Keep that in mind. Fauna Shaman is the next card in this section, and it's done so much work for me. I absolutely love when this card is able to be played and I get access to it. It's 1 and a green for a 2/2 elf shaman. You can pay a green, you tap her, you discard a card, you search your library for a creature card. I'm sorry, you discard a creature card, you search your library for a creature card, reveal it, put in your hand, and shuffle your library. This is just setting up our graveyard, sculpting our hand. Fauna Shaman is super powerful. I used to have a Survival of the Fittest, but I had to get rid of it. I'm really thinking about rebuying it and putting it into this because Fauna Shaman is just a creature version of that, and both cards are super, super powerful in this. Next card is super expensive. I am running a proxy of that. I'm running a proxy of this, I should say. There are quite a few proxies in this list, and I will point them out as we get there. This is actually the first one we've ran across. It's Intuition. It's 2 and a blue. It's for an instant. You search your library for any 3 cards and reveal them to target opponent. He or she chooses 1. You put that card in your hand and the rest in your graveyard. Shuffle your library afterwards. This is a very, very powerful card. There's a reason why it's super expensive. I'm essentially getting to tutor for 3 cards. For what this deck does, I'm going to get every one of those cards. Like, whether they go into my hand or go into my graveyard, I'm going to have access to them one way or another. Very powerful. Final card in this section is Auroch Lore Mage. It's 2 double black for a human warlock. It's a 3/3. You tap it, you search your library for a card, put that card in your graveyard, then shuffle. If it's an instant or sorcery card, you put a +1/+1 counter on Auroch Lore Mage. I do like this card, but I think it could become something else and could be another instance of card draw or ramp. I've used it, but it's one of those things, if someone sees it, it doesn't give me instant access to the card I'm wanting to tutor for. And unfortunately, it's just kind of slow. Fauna Shaman, I do have to wait a turn, but it's 2 mana as opposed to a 4 mana creature, so it can come down sooner and is less mana intensive, I guess. I don't know. You could argue because you're paying the 1 green constantly, there's more setup for Fauna Shaman, but I'm getting 2 for 1. I don't know. Auric Lore Mage is a good card. I just don't know if it's the right card for this build with having the access I do to the other tutors. Okay, so we have 2 more sections to get through, and then there's some lands I'm going to talk about. Now we're going to start getting into the actual creature base of this deck. There are quite a few creatures. There's a lot of weird stuff going on, and I'll explain it as kind of we get there because I've had a lot of interesting turns because of the creature suite I'm running. So we're going to get into the splicing section. The first one is Suspicious Sterix. It's 4 and a green for a 6/6 elf beast with mutate for 5 and a green. Whenever this creature mutates, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile X permanent cards, where X is the number of times this creature has mutated. Put the permanent cards onto the battlefield. So, worst possible case, you get 1 card, potentially. Otherwise, I've had many games where I've had a single creature, my Mimeoplasm, mutate multiple times, and I've been able to stick a ton of cards that were way more expensive than the 6 I paid for. Auspicious 6 is a lot of fun. I've enjoyed this card. Next, we have Boneyard Lurker. It's 2 black and a green for a 4/4 Nightmare Beast. It has mutate for 2 hybrid black green, black green. Whenever this creature mutates, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. It's an Eternal Witness, essentially, with mutate, which is what I want to be doing in this deck. It's also a lot of fun. Next card I've talked about already when I was speaking about Intuition. It's Borkros, Apex of Forever. It's 2 black, green, blue for a legendary creature, Nightmare Beast Elemental, 6/6 with mutate for 2 hybrid blue, black, and then double green. It has trample, and you may cast Borkros, Apex of Forever from your graveyard using its mutate ability. So, in a lot of my situations and a lot of things that I'll do if I have to get multiple cards, I've actually got Borkros as one of those cards multiple times because typically people see that it's either going to be cast for its mutate calls from hand or from the graveyard. So most of the time, if it goes to grave, it still doesn't bother me. Um, it's a sweet card, and the fact that it's a 6/6 with trample is awesome. Those are great stat lines. I've put it on a Cold Eye Selkie before, and it's very, very funny because suddenly I'm hitting for 6, drawing for 6, basically unblockable. And if there is a creature with Island Walk, it's typically another opponent's Cold Eye Selkie, and it just loses out on the stat line. It's great. Mind Leecher is another card with mutate. It's 4 double black for a 5/5 nightmare creature, and it mutates for 4 and a black. It has flying. Whenever this creature mutates, exile the top card of each opponent's library face down. You may look at them and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. So this card is essentially letting us steal from the top of our opponent's library. I really like to play this card after someone has already played like a worldly tutor or one of the tutors that go to the top of library as opposed to hand, just to kind of get rid of that card. Otherwise, it's just a fun card to play in general. We might not always have access to the colors we need to be able to play the card. That's kind of like the fine print on this card. You don't have the line where it's like you can use mana or any color to cast those spells like you see in other cards. But we're in 3 of the most popular colors in Commander. So I think it's more likely that you're going to hit with Mind Leecher than not hit with Mind Leecher. The last card in the splicing section is Otrimi the Ever Playful. This was my original Mutate Commander, but as I played it more and more, I actually liked it in the 99 as opposed to the Commander, and the Mimeoplasm has just allowed for so many silly plays. So Otrimi is 3 black, green, blue for a 6/6 legendary creature Nightmare Beast. It mutates for 1 black, green, blue. It has trample. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, return target creature card with mutate from your graveyard to your hand. So if you're like tortured existencing to get cards back and you have an Otrimi, you're basically able to like pitch one of your mutate cards, attack with, you know, the Otrimi creature, get it back. And a 6/6 for trample for mutate for 4 is amazing stat lines. Even the 6 that you would have to pay to just play it is still fine. All right. The last big section of this deck list is the DNA section. So this is where all the non-mutate creatures are, and these are like either what I'm wanting the Mimeoplasm to become ability-wise or stat line-wise, or what I'm wanting to give evasion through the mutate creatures. So I picked some of the creatures that like maybe on their own don't seem that impressive, but being paired with um, the mutate creatures in this list, or paired with a creature that has bigger power and toughness, suddenly become really, really insane. First card on the list is Bio Waste Blob. It's 2 double green for a 0/0 ooze. Oozes you control get +1/+1. So we have a few oozes in this deck that will enjoy that. And also, it doesn't say other oozes, it just says oozes. So this is going to be an innate like +1/+1 to itself and the Mimeoplasm. Then it reads, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control a commander, create a token that's a copy of Bio Waste Blob. So you're going to see that kind of text a lot if you can, like you create a token that's a copy of that creature. This is where it gets to be fun. So if you've mutated something onto Bio Waste Blob and you control your commander, whatever you mutated it onto it, that Bio Waste Blob is going to become a copy of that stack. So let's say I put Otrimi the Ever Playful on the bottom, so it's Bio Waste Blob on top. Then you have a 6/6 with trample Bio Waste Blob and the text line. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, return target creature card with mutate from your graveyard to your hand. That is going to continue to just keep creating tokens of itself. And if you continue to mutate and on top of that Bio Waste Blob stack, it's going to continue to happen. It becomes very, very crazy, and it's a lot to keep track of, but man, it is so much fun. And if you have your commander out, you're going to continue to get these like anthem effects where it's +1/+1. So if I go a whole turn cycle, I have Bio Waste Blob and my commander out. Now suddenly I make a copy of Bio Waste Blob and my commander is getting +2/+2, and so on and so forth. And these will stack with each other. So if I have 2 Bio Waste Blobs on my turn, I pass, everything is still the same, I have my commander, my 2 Bio Waste Blobs are going to make 2 more. So now I have 4. And then 4 will become 8. And it gets out of hand very, very quickly. Next on the list is Cephalid Constable. It's 1 double blue for a 1/1 Cephalid Wizard. Whenever Cephalid Constable deals combat damage to a player, return up to that many target permanents that player controls to their owner's hand. This card is super, super mean. So on its own, a 1/1 for 3, not very good, especially without the evasion. But we're able to give it evasion in this deck. We're able to make it massive. Suddenly, like I've had games where I've had the Mimeoplasm become a 12/12 and have this Cephalid Constable's ability, and I'm returning 12 permanents to an opponent's hand. It is brutal. It's also a lot of fun. I've also lost a lot of friends because of those kind of lines of play. Next card on the list is Demigoth Titan. It's hybrid green black, green black, green black, green black. So 4 for an 11/10 demon, and whenever it attacks or blocks, you sacrifice a creature. I don't care about that line of text. I'm never going to be concerned about that because I'm always going to make this power and toughness for the Mimeoplasm. Or I will just use it as a mutate creature and suddenly I'm swinging for 11 unblockable or something silly. It's just a big old body. That's what we really want in this kind of deck. I guess the attack and block clause has been relevant. I've had times where I've sacrificed creatures so I could recast them from grave, or so that the Mimeoplasm could become a copy of them. So I guess it's not that irrelevant, but mainly it's here for its stats. Right. So this next card, once again, it reads very, very awkwardly, but it becomes so silly so quickly. It's Essence of the Wild. It's 3 triple green for a 6/6 avatar. Creatures you control enter the battlefield as a copy of Essence of the Wild. So I have played the Mimeoplasm. Um, well, I've had to like sack some creatures to make this work before, but I've had a Sakashima in my battlefield already. I played the Mimeoplasm as a copy of Essence of the Wild ability and then have it become a Demigoth Titan. So it was an 11-10 Essence of the Wild Mimeoplasm. Sakashima says that I'll read it when we get to it, but Sakashima says that the legendary rule doesn't apply. So then I was just playing creatures and they were 11-10 Mimeoplasms. It's it's a lot of fun. It becomes very silly very quickly. On its own, it's a 6/6, and it's just great. It's so much fun. Next, we have Flesh Eater Imp. It's 3 and a black for a 2/2 imp with flying and infect, and you can sacrifice a creature to and Flesh Eater Imp gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And a lot of lists, you'll probably see this be Skithrix. I didn't want to play Skithrix. I felt like Flesh Eater Imp was fine. It's essentially doing the same thing, guaranteeing Voltron kills. It's the only instance of infect I have in the deck. But otherwise, like, it's just too good of a creature not to add. Its stat line is fine, and being able to sacrifice a creature once again is pretty relevant. If we need it to be in graveyard because we had to play it as its, as a normal creature, is okay. Gigan Cyber Claw Terror or Garuda Doom of Depths is the next card. It's 4 hybrid blue black for a 6/6 Demon Kraken legendary creature. It has companion, which we're not playing it as a companion in this deck. Its ability says when it enters the battlefield, each player puts the top 4 cards of their library into their graveyard. You put a creature card with an even converted mana cost from among those cards onto the battlefield under your control. So when we play this card, we're getting a look at the top 4 cards of everybody's graveyard. So library into their graveyard. So it's helping us to be able to make our Mimeoplasm become whatever we want it to be in our deck, but also, getting the option to make the Mimeoplasm become a creature from other people's graveyards. Remember, it can choose any graveyard. So it is a good form of graveyard hate in general, but like the fun of this deck, the fun of this commander is being able to make these really weird creatures, right? So things that shouldn't have higher power and toughness, like Cephalid Constable, now becomes super scary. Or you could do something as silly like I've had games where I just wanted to be, have fun, and I made the Mimeoplasm become a Birds of Paradise. These are just things you can do. So that's part of the fun of this deck. Keep that kind of stuff in mind. Next, we have Necrotic Ooze. It's 2 double black for a 4/3 ooze. As long as Necrotic Ooze is on the battlefield, it has all active evade abilities of all creature cards in all graveyards. So there are some activated abilities that we care about in ours, but mainly it's in there to kind of catch other people off guard. If you have someone that's like, you can untap your creature by doing this, or something silly, or like a Royal Assassin, or maybe someone else has an Auroch Lore Mage in their graveyard. Or like a Flesh Eater Imp, because that's also an activated ability. There are a lot of different creatures that we want to be able to take advantage of that we necessarily couldn't put in this deck. This allows us to have access to them. So kind of greedy, but the art's sweet and it's in here. This guy, Nighthawk Scavenger, is in here for its ability because it's super, super insane. It's 1 double black for a Vampire Rogue. It's a 1+ *3. So it has Flying Death Touch Lifelink. Nighthawk Scavenger's power is equal to 1 plus a number of card types among cards in your graveyard. So you can do a lot of weird things, right? So like you can have it become Mimeoplasm become a copy of Nighthawk Scavenger, then have it become a copy of another big creature. So maybe it's not the 1 plus *3, maybe it's a 1 plus *11 or 10, something silly. You still get access to all these crazy abilities on it, or I'm sorry, keywords on it, but also you can just mutate a creature onto this, and suddenly, like, my Dreamtail Hyren is Flying Death Touch Lifelink, or my Sea Dasher Octopus, or even something as crazy as like Borkros now has Flying Death Touch Lifelink Trample, and is big. Just something to think about. It's a really good card. I haven't got to use this next card yet. It's just for some reason I've not been able to draw it when I've played this deck, but it's kind of working like Bio-Waste Blob. That's uh, I can't say this name right, so you guys are gonna have to bear with me. Orch Jelly. It's X green. Uh, it's a 0/0 ooze. It has trample, and it enters the battlefield X +1/+1 counters on it. And then it has the ability Split. When this creature dies, if it had 2 or more +1/1 counters on it, create a token that's a copy of it at the beginning of the next end step. The token enters the battlefield with half that many +1/+1 counters on it rounded down. Man, this card does so many silly things. It's like it's another version kind of Bio-Waste Blob, right? So I'm able to like maybe have Mimeoplasm come in like this, or maybe I have a really big scary creature that I've put a ton +1/+1 counters on. So like let's say, I don't know, like I have Otrimi come as a copy of this guy. As long as I put a couple +1/+1 counters onto it, I'm gonna have multiple copies of this jelly that isn't Otrimi, but has all the stat lines and abilities of Otrimi. It's so silly. I love it. It's so much fun. This next card ruled standard for a very long time, but I like it so much more in Commander. It's Questing Beast. It's 2 double green for a legendary creature beast, 4/4. It has Vigilance, Death Touch, Haste. It can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. Combat damage that would be dealt by creatures you control can't be prevented. And whenever it deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to target planeswalker that player controls. It just, it's good. I typically don't have the Mimeoplasm come in as a 4/4. Typically, it comes in with all these stat lines. But otherwise, like, once again, this is a situation where Otrimi or Borkaros just makes this even better because then it has trample and become a 6/6. Very good. So we already talked about Sakashima, but I need to read both of them so you kind of understand what I'm talking about. So the first one is Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. As 3 and a blue for a 3/1 legendary creature human rogue. As it ETBs, it becomes a copy of another target creature you control, except it's Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. Except it has Sakashima of 1,000 Faces other abilities, and the legendary rule doesn't apply to permanents you control. Just wild. If you've already built a really crazy Mimeoplasm, you just have Sakashima become a copy of that, but the legendary rule doesn't apply. It's very good, and it has partner. We're not using partner. Don't need it in this deck. Then we have its younger version or older version. I don't know how you want to look at it because it depends on like set. It doesn't matter. We have Sakashima the Imposter, 2 double blue for a legendary creature human rogue 3/1. As it comes into play, you choose a creature in play. If you do, Sakashima comes in as a copy of it, but it's still Sakashima the Imposter, and it's still legendary, and it gains 2 double blue. Return Sakashima the Imposter to its owner's hand at the end of turn. If you want to reset, so like maybe you build up another creature, you have a creature with a like mutate stack on it, right? You have Sakashima come in as that card, but then you've built more onto that other creature, like that stack. So then you could just return Sakashima to recast Sakashima. So now it becomes a copy of that stack as is, as opposed to what it was. It's a lot of fun. So this is another card that typically if you see it on the battlefield, no matter what deck it's in, you probably need to get rid of it, but it's even more insane in this deck. It's Scoot Swarm. It's 2 and a green for a 1/1 insect. It has landfall. Whenever a land ETBs under your control, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. If you control 6 or more lands, create a token that's a copy of Scoot Swarm instead. All right. So this is another situation where if you mutate onto Scoot Swarm, and then hit that magic of like 6 lands, suddenly your Scoot Swarm, you're getting copies of it, right? And once you do that, it's the same thing. It's like how Bio-Waste Blob works. It just doubles everything that you have. So I always talk about Otrimi because Otrimi is kind of like the absolute man. I want to mutate Otrimi onto everything. Could you imagine you have and I've done this, you have a Scoot Swarm with an Otrimi over top of it. So it's a 6/6 tramp. Well, I guess you want to go underneath, maybe. Yeah. Otherwise, it's legendary. But you could have Sakashima. All right. There's a lot of stuff going on. Either way, you could have a 1/1 Scoot Swarm with trample with its ability, and then suddenly you mutate more stuff onto it, and you hit your 6 lands, and that stack of that Scoo Swarm that's creating is always going to be copies of that stack. It gets out of hand, and it's a lot to keep track of. Um, we have Slippery Bogle. It's a hybrid blue-green. It's a 1/1 beast with hexproof. Sometimes you just want the hexproof. Sometimes you just want to keep your Mimeoplasm around, or you want your stack to be not targetable by other people's stuff. Not more to say about that. Sludge Monster is another new card that I've added to this deck. It's 3 double blue for a 5/5 horror. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, put a slime counter on up to one other target creature. Non-horror creatures with slime counters on them lose all abilities and have base power toughness 2/2. This is just a fun card to have because it turns off abilities of other creatures, but also it's a good ability to like put on creatures, right? Or put on the Mimeoplasm. Maybe you just need to turn things off so that you're only worried about getting blocked by a 2/2. Pretty nice. More evasion, or should I say more hexproof in our creature lineup. We have Thrun the Last Troll. It's 2 double green for a 4/4 legendary creature, Troll Shaman. It can't be countered. It can't be the target spells or abilities your opponents control. So this is hexproof before it got worded as hexproof. And then for 1 and a green, you can regenerate Thrun. So if you make your Mimeoplasm a copy of this Thrun, you can regenerate it so you don't lose it, and it has hexproof. Pretty nice. Here's one of the big beaters I was talking about. We have Godzilla Primeval Champion, or what's his something Rex. I forget what the first name is, but it's 7 double green for an 11/11. It's a dinosaur beast with trample, and it has cycling for 1 and a green. And when you cycle it, you can put a trample counter on target creature you control. So I've had many plays where I cycle it, put a trample counter on one of my creatures that don't have trample, and then have Mimeoplasm come in as an 11/11. It's not unreasonable. It does kind of everything you want to do, and I really wish I had more kind of creatures like this to be able to just cycle them away, put a counter on something, and then bring it back from the graveyard, essentially. Um, we have that, and so that was our green version of that. We had the black version, which is Space Godzilla Void Invader. It's 6 double black for an 8/8 Nightmare Horror with Death Touch. It has cycling for 2 and a black, and when you cycle it, you put a Death Touch counter on target creature. So 8/8 is still a really big body with Death Touch, and you're putting a Death Touch counter on something. So once again, like if you have your Dream Teleheron or you have your Sea Dash or Octopus, do you really want to trade me drawing a card for a creature you want to block with? Not that good of a trade. Final card in our DNA section here is Rexiel, the Risen Deep. It's 3 double blue and a black for a 5/8 legendary creature Kraken. It has Island Walk and Swamp Walk, and when it deals combat damage to a player, you may cast an instant or sorcery from target player's graveyard without paying its mana cost. And then if you do, it gets exiled. It's phenomenal. Like the evasion in Island Walk and Swamp Walk is amazing, but then the ability to cast an instant or sorcery without paying its mana costs, very, very good. So that is the bulk of the deck. We have some pretty good lands in here. Mainly, I just have a lot of fetches and a lot of dual lands. I have a ton of proxies in here for my dual lands. I have all the fetches. I have all the shocks, but I don't have access to an Underground Sea, Trop Island, or a Bayou, but I really want them in this deck, so I proxied them. You know how we feel about proxies here. We say go for it. The only card I really want to talk about, and I feel like it should go in every Simic deck, is Alchemist's Refuge. If you don't know what this card does, it's a land. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Then you can pay a blue and a green and tap it, and you can cast non-land cards this turn as though they had flash. So all of your sorceries, your artifacts, your creatures, which is the big part, all have flash. It's pretty good. And that's the deck. I really, really enjoy this deck. I'm probably going to edit it a little bit more because I really want to add a few more mutate creatures into this deck because I really like being able to just kind of Voltron out a creature and get these really weird interactions where Biowaste Blob suddenly has all these crazy abilities that it shouldn't have innately, or even the same thing with the Mimeoplasm. Mutate's it's probably my favorite keyword that Magic has created in a very long time. I really, really hope we see more of it. I really loved Ikoria in general. So like I'm so hoping we go back to Ikoria soon, or we just get more mutate because it's a super fun mechanic and it makes a lot of like creatures that you normally wouldn't play just phenomenal or just give them like new life. And that's kind of the fun about playing Commander for me is taking cards I normally wouldn't use in any other format and suddenly they become super good in this format. So if you like my deck, tell me what you think. If there are creatures you'd want to add in this deck, let me know. You can find me anywhere on social media as Necrozach. That's Nekrozach. And if you like us and you want to support us, you can find our website, instant99.com. That's our one stop shop for all things Instant 99, whether that be merch or where to listen to us, where to watch us, it even gives you access to our Discord where we're in daily, constantly talking about all things magic and all things not magic because, we're people and we like things outside of magic as well. You can also find Lotus on Brunette Live. She's been doing it once a month now. I'm not entirely sure of the time frame, but I know that you can find all that information on our website. So I've been Necrozach. This is the Mimeoplasm. Hope you guys have a good day.